What happens when a man is called to lead a world he barely knows? When tradition demands his loyalty, but his heart belongs to the city? This is the story of Mwangi, a man caught between two worlds, torn between the skyscrapers of Nairobi and the ancestral throne of Kamweti. Can he bridge the gap between modern ambition and ancient duty? Or will the weight of his legacy be too much to bear? The city was alive with honking horns, street vendors selling snacks through car windows, and bodas weaving through the congested roads. A conductor, a lanky young man in a bright football jersey, leaned halfway out of the open sliding door of a matatu, a public minibus, shouting, "Ushago, ushago, tunashukisha kwa stage yote." Upcountry, we stop at every stage. Mwangi, dressed in a tailored white shirt and dark trousers, stepped in. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of exhaust fumes, sweat, and overused vanilla air freshener. The music blared from the overhead speakers, a mix of old-school benga, modern Afrobeats, and the occasional gospel tune when the driver felt the need to seek divine protection for the chaotic journey ahead. The bass thumped hard, shaking the loose panels of the matatu, making it feel like a moving nightclub on wheels. The matatu's driver, a middle-aged man, gripped the steering wheel confidently, weaving through traffic with the effortless recklessness Nairobi matatu drivers were known for. As the matatu left the congested streets of Nairobi and merged onto the Thika superhighway, the ride became smoother, if only for a while. At a stop near Makuyu, an elderly woman carrying a basket of fresh vegetables climbed aboard, settling into the seat beside Mwangi with a kind nod. She smelled of earth and wood smoke, a scent that transported him back to childhood memories of his grandmother's kitchen in Kamweti. The further the matatu traveled, the more rugged the road became. The smooth tarmac turned into narrow dirt paths, red dust rising in plumes as the driver expertly maneuvered past herds of cattle and donkeys pulling wooden carts. The landscape became quieter, untouched by the chaos of the city, yet Mwangi still felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden rays across the distant hills, the matatu reached the final stretch leading to Kamweti. The conductor banged on the metal side of the van, signaling the driver to stop. "Shukisha hapombele!" Drop him off up ahead. The hum of the city still echoed in Mwangi's ears as he stepped off the dusty matatu that had carried him from Nairobi to the small village of Kamweti. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh cow dung, a sharp contrast to the exhaust fumes and sizzling street food he had grown accustomed to in the city. He adjusted his suit jacket, feeling out of place among the villagers in their colorful kangas and simple shirts. "Karibu Mwangi," an old man greeted him, extending a wrinkled hand. It was Mzee Kamau, an elder of the village and one of his late grandfather's closest advisors. "Thank you, Mzee," Mwangi responded, shaking the man's hand firmly, though his eyes remained cautious. He had not been back here since he was a child. His mother had taken him away after his father's tragic death, determined that he would get a proper education and make something of himself in Nairobi. But now, fate, or rather, the village elders, had called him back. His grandfather, Chief Njogu, had passed away a month ago, and a strange rumor had begun to circulate. Mwangi was the rightful heir. The very idea was absurd to him. He was a marketing executive, not a chief. He wore polished leather shoes, not the open sandals of a village leader. And yet, he had come. Something deep inside him had urged him to. Even as he sat alone on a wooden bench outside a small shop, a part of him still wasn't sure if he had made the right decision in coming. Leaving Nairobi even temporarily had not been easy. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, countless sleepless nights spent staring at his apartment ceiling, his mind racing with questions. How could he just walk away from everything he had built? His career as a marketing executive was flourishing, and his future was secure. Why trade that for a rural life he had barely known? And then there was Aisha. He had met her 3 years ago at a corporate networking event. Aisha was brilliant, ambitious, and as deeply rooted in city life as he was. He had often spoken about their dreams, expanding their careers, traveling the world, and starting a family. But nowhere in those plans had Kamweti been mentioned. How was he supposed to explain to her that he was now being asked to lead a village? He had tried to tell her before leaving. They had sat in their favorite cafe, the scent of roasted coffee beans hanging in the air, as he struggled to find the right words. "They want me to take over as chief," he had finally said, staring into his untouched cappuccino. Aisha had blinked, then laughed. "That's a joke, right?" He had shaken his head, and her expression shifted from amusement to disbelief. "You're serious?" "I don't know what to do, Aisha. I can't just ignore it." "But Mwangi, you have a career here. And what about us?" He had no answer then. And now, standing in Kamweti's village square, he still didn't. The village square was packed. Men, women, and children gathered around the old council hut, where the elders sat in a semicircle, their faces stern with expectation. "We have called you here, Mwangi," said Kamau, standing to address the crowd, "because the spirit of our ancestors has chosen you." Mwangi swallowed hard. The weight of 100 eyes pressed down on him. "But my cousin, Muchiri, he has been running things, hasn't he?" Mwangi asked, trying to keep his voice steady. A murmur spread through the crowd like wildfire. Muchiri stepped forward. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp eyes and an ever-present smirk. Unlike Mwangi, he had never left the village. He had stayed, overseeing the family lands and maintaining the chiefdom's affairs. "And I have done well," Muchiri said, his voice edged with challenge. "I have cared for this land for our people, while you were away in the city, drinking coffee and typing on computers." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd, but the elders did not smile. "Bloodline is stronger than time, Muchiri," Kamau said, his voice unwavering. "But tradition does not hand out power freely. If Mwangi is to be chief, he must prove himself." Mwangi's heart pounded. Prove himself? How? The first test was one of wisdom. The elders gathered in the sacred hut, and Mwangi was seated before them. A small wooden stool was placed in front of him, along with a gourd of muratina, a traditional brew. "Tell us," said Kamau. "A leader must balance tradition and change. How would you ensure that Kamweti does not lose its heritage while still advancing in the modern world?" Mwangi took a deep breath. This, at least, was a challenge he could handle. "We must preserve our traditions," he said slowly, "by teaching the young people their importance. But we cannot be stuck in the past. If we do not adapt, we will be left behind. We can build schools, but also teach our history. We can grow our businesses, but also protect our farmlands. A true leader finds the bridge between the old and the new." The elders nodded in approval. Muchiri, standing in the shadows, clenched his fists. The second test was one of strength. In the morning, Mwangi was led to the riverbank, where the young warriors of the village trained. He was given a spear and told to hunt, not an animal, but a test of endurance. "To be chief, you must prove you can protect the land," one of the elders explained. "You must track and capture the wild bull that has been causing trouble on the farmlands." A low chuckle rumbled from Muchiri's throat. He had hunted countless times. But Mwangi, a city man chasing a wild bull? Impossible. Sweat dripped down Mwangi's brow as he moved through the thickets, his suit now replaced with a shuka tied around his waist. He had never hunted before, but he was a fast learner. He observed the footprints in the soil, listening to the murmurs of the forest. Hours passed before he finally spotted the bull, an enormous beast, its horns sharp as knives. Using strategy rather than brute force, Mwangi led the animal into a narrow ravine where it could not escape. Then, with the help of a few warriors, he secured it. The village erupted in cheers as Mwangi returned with the captured bull. Even the elders looked impressed. Muchiri scowled. The final test was one of unity. A leader must bring people together. The elders gave both Mwangi and Muchiri a task: settle a long-standing land dispute between two feuding families. Muchiri took the aggressive approach. He insisted that the stronger family had the right to claim the land, demanding they sign an agreement that the others had no choice but to accept. Mwangi, on the other hand, sat with both families separately, listening to their grievances. He found a compromise, a way for them to share the land for different purposes. When the two families agreed, shaking hands for the first time in years, the decision was clear. Mwangi had won. Mwangi sat with the elders, deep in thought. He had proven himself. He had won their tests. But he had also realized something. He did not have to choose between Kamweti and the city. "I will accept my role as chief," he announced, his voice firm. "But I will not abandon my work in Nairobi. The future of this village depends on blending tradition with progress. I can oversee both." The elders murmured among themselves before nodding in approval. Muchiri, standing at a distance, watched cautiously. Mwangi turned to him. "Muchiri, you have served this village well. I want you to be part of the Council of Elders. Help me build Kamweti into something greater." Muchiri hesitated, then slowly nodded. Later that evening, Mwangi sat under a baobab tree, phone in hand. He took a deep breath and dialed. Aisha's voice answered on the other end. "We need to talk," he said. A long silence, then a soft sigh. "Yes, we do." As the sun set over Kamweti, Mwangi knew the journey was far from over, but he was ready to walk both paths. Aisha sat across from Mwangi in the chief's homestead, the dim glow of a lantern casting flickering shadows across the mud brick walls. She had traveled all the way from Nairobi, frustration simmering beneath her composed exterior. She had called, she had texted, and yet Mwangi had been distant. And now, standing before her in the full regalia of a village chief, she finally understood why. "You made this decision without me," she said, her voice steady, though hurt seeped into her words. "You didn't even tell me." Mwangi sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I wasn't sure how to explain it, Aisha. Everything happened so fast." Aisha shook her head. "You should have tried." She looked around, taking in the weight of his new life. The people relied on him. The elders sought his counsel, and with that came expectations. And if she married him, she would not just be Aisha anymore. She would be the chief's wife. The village would have expectations of her too. "I don't know if this is the life I want," she admitted, meeting his gaze. "I built my career in the city. I had dreams, Mwangi." Mwangi reached for her hands. "I know. And I still want us to figure this out together. I didn't choose this to push you away." She exhaled, feeling the weight of her choices pressing on her. She loved him, but love alone would not erase the responsibilities that came with his new title. The question was, could she be part of this world? And more importantly, did she want to be? As the days passed, Aisha struggled with the reality of what it would mean to be a chief's wife. She was not from Mwangi's tribe, and while the people of Kamweti had been warm and welcoming, she could sense that they expected certain things from her, things she wasn't sure she could give. She had spent her whole life in Nairobi's fast-paced world, where she was independent, ambitious, and in control of her path. Here, in Kamweti, her role would be defined by tradition, by expectations she had never imagined for herself. She loved Mwangi, that much she knew, but was love enough? One evening, as they sat outside his home watching the sunset over the acacia trees, she made her decision. "Mwangi," she said softly, her voice heavy with emotion. "I can't do this." Mwangi turned to her, his heart sinking. "Aisha." "I don't belong here," she continued. "I wasn't raised with these traditions, and I don't know if I can learn to be the woman your people expect me to be." He was silent for a long moment, then finally nodded. "I understand," he said, though his voice was thick with pain. She took his hand, squeezing it one last time. "I will always love you," she whispered. And with that, Aisha returned to Nairobi. For the next year, they both remained single, unable to move on. As days turned into weeks, Mwangi fulfilled his duties as chief, modernizing Kamweti while respecting its traditions. He brought new agricultural methods to the farmers, improved the village school, and sought funding for clean water projects. He traveled between the village and the city for his marketing job, but he felt incomplete. Every time he walked into an empty house at night, every time he passed by a couple in the marketplace, he thought of her. Aisha threw herself into work, trying to bury the ache in her chest. She went on a few dates, but no one ever measured up. Whenever she sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone, she resisted the urge to call him. Until one day, Mwangi called her first. "Aisha." His voice on the other end of the line made her heart race. She closed her eyes, letting his name settle inside her again. "Mwangi." There was silence for a moment before he finally said, "I haven't been able to move on." Aisha felt her breath catch in her throat. "My heart only loves you," he continued. "It doesn't matter how much time passes, Aisha. You're the only one I see, the only one I want." Tears welled in her eyes. "I feel the same way," she admitted. Mwangi took a deep breath. "Then let's stop pretending. Come back to Kamweti, not because you have to, but because we can build something together. You don't have to be the perfect chief's wife. We'll figure it out, together." Aisha exhaled, her heart pounding. And then she smiled. "I'll come," she said, her voice steady. "And this time, I will learn. I will learn the responsibilities, the ins and outs of your world. And I will help you continue the legacy of your tribe and your family." Mwangi closed his eyes in relief, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Aisha, you don't know how much this means to me." She laughed, wiping her tears. "Oh, I do." A week later, Aisha returned to Kamweti, not as a visitor, but as Mwangi's partner. The village welcomed her, not as an outsider, but as a woman willing to embrace their ways. She sat with the elders, listened to the women, and learned the traditions. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And as she and Mwangi stood together, watching another sunset over Kamweti, she finally knew. This was where she belonged. And this was only the beginning. Stories connect us to our past, shape our present, and guide our future. African Legends and Stories is more than just storytelling. It is a bridge between yesterday and tomorrow, between tradition and modernity. Subscribe now and be part of this journey. Like, comment, and share to keep these legends alive. This is African Legends and Stories, where the past speaks and the future listens.